How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Today is Thursday, April 16th, and I am your host, American Lumberjack. I am here with you guys to give you a great show today on TimberTalk, and I am so excited to give you stuff that the mainstream media is not giving you, and ultimately give you the truth. Because if we're not giving you the truth, are we really giving you news, or are we just out for the clicks, likes, and the views? I personally know to have the information spread, you need the clicks, likes, and views. However, what's the point of the clicks, likes, and views if we're not telling the truth? I'm reminded of how on Facebook they'll spread misinformation like drugs, essentially, and people just eat it up. I don't want to do that for you guys. And I just want to continue to stay honest and truthful with the information I give to you guys, because there's going to come a time where you won't be able to find true information. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with prayer, and we're gonna get into the show. We have a stacked show, a very stacked show tonight. So, dear Heavenly Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for this awesome opportunity that you have bestowed upon us to give you praise, glory, and honor, Lord. And we do so in our thoughts, words, and actions and deeds, Lord. And we just thank you for this opportunity to spread truth, spread your word, and to glorify your name, Father. And we ask these things in Jesus' mighty name, I pray. Amen. All right, guys. Like I said, we have a stacked show. I have 8 solid stories for you that you may or may not have heard of. So we're going to get right into it. Let me slide over here real quick and make sure we are good here. And we are live there. Fantastic. All right. There's a difference between something happening and something being allowed to happen. And I hope that you guys are able to understand that there's a staunch difference between the two. 1 second. Let's see here. Let's turn this up right here. And we will see if that looks or sounds a little bit better here shortly. All right. So hopefully guys can hear me a little bit better, and I'm coming in a little bit more clear, and yeah, away we go. So there is a difference between something allowed to happen versus something just happening, right? Most people watch the headlines and that's it. Yeah, they read a headline and then they go run off, start screaming about it. We know this. We know this. We need to tell you about this, that, and the third. But nobody ever just takes a step back and look with their eyes. And if you do, you'll start noticing who's making the decisions behind those things that are just happening versus being made to happen. And you see who gets removed. You see who gets protected, who gets a voice, and who doesn't get any of those things at all. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Ultimately, this isn't just about the events anymore. We're coming up on a time in America where everybody's aware, and you got one of these little handy dandy phones in your hand, and you're able to get information at the drop of a hat within milliseconds of the thing actually happening. So we are an informed nation, but being informed with what is what matters. It's about control. Control inside the courts, control inside the global institutions, control inside the government, and control over belief itself. And if we don't know who's controlling these things or pulling the strings, so to speak, we can't really see things clearly, and we get corralled into one category or the next. And ultimately, there is a verse, because I got to give you the Bible. Can't go without giving you the Bible. There's a verse that directly speaks to this, and it comes out of Psalms 94, 20 through 21. And it says, "Shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with you, which frameth mischief by the law? They gather themselves together against the souls of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood." How many times have we seen systems around the world, not just in America, condemn innocent people? Personally, if you take a step back and get out of your own self bubble that you've created, you'll see a lot of people being condemned that are innocent. You'll see a lot of people that are righteous being forsaken by the system that was set up to actually keep them safe. The Constitution is a beautiful entity, but it is not being practiced and worked the way it was originally intended, right? When power starts writing the rules, you have to ask, what do those rules really do? Are they really serving you, me, or are they serving a system that is ran by a bunch of individuals that don't really care about how the little man feels? In our first segment tonight, we are going to jump right into it with a full court press. The Trump administration is making a move inside the immigration court and systems, and it's not a subtle one at all. We know Trump is not a very subtle individual. We know Trump is loud, obnoxious sometimes, and just in your face because he likes to do things big. It's happening inside the courts, and it's happening quick. Immigration judges are being removed quickly and fast in a hurry. And if you blink, you might just miss them. So in Boston right now, there are judges that are just being axed left and right. If you know or have been coming to the podcast at all, you would have heard me speak about all of these federal judges and immigration judges that are really trying to be activists in a robe, stopping the process that are legally able to happen. And they're doing illegal actions or flexing their judicial power to stop these things from happening. But in Boston, Judge Rupal Patel has been dismissed. After presiding over high-profile immigration cases, she's been dropped off at the corner and told to walk home. And she's not the only one. Multiple judges across Massachusetts alone and other parts of the country have been removed silently. Why? Because if you are an immigration judge, you are at the behest and will of the President of the United States. Because Article 2 judges, which are immigration judges, falls under the purview and power of the president. And Donald Trump is not playing games anymore. He's saying, hey, you guys were appointed to do a job and you're not doing it. So this is not a thing that is randomly happening. It's reshaping of the system from the inside. And immigration courts are not independent like federal courts. So you guys need to understand the difference. A lot of people don't understand the difference because they sit behind one of these things right here and they think they're smart because they read a headline or two. But immigration courts, again, as I already stated, are under the purview of Article 2, which is the executive, which is for the president. Whereas Article 1 courts, where the federal courts reside, or Article 3, where the federal courts reside, being the Supreme Court, fall under the purview of actually the Congress. Congress can put a halt to federal judges if they so choose to. So there is a staunch difference between the two. The executive branch is the enforcement branch of the federal government. You have to understand that. So if you think police officers, think executive. When the executive is not doing what it is supposed to and playing caddy to the Congress, which is the legislative branch, you have a system of corruption and things start to get real murky real quick. But when you specifically look at the Department of Justice, that means the Attorney General has the authority to hire and fire these judges. And the Attorney General is going to do what the president says, or they get fired, right? The system is being overwhelmed and has been for a very long time. For years, decades even, they have used immigration as a bargaining chip to get your vote. Well, Trump says no more. And these activist judges have to go because that's why backlog cases are being delayed in their decision making because of these activist judges. They're getting paid and their pockets padded to keep illegals in this country, to help these illegals evade detection and capture. This presents great challenges for enforcement, and the executive branch is not able to do what they're supposed to do. Ultimately, the administration's position is, hey, we have to tighten up on the system from the inside, enforce the law, and remove any obstruction. We have judges out here playing lawfare and pretending to be something that they're not. You cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. There are roles to each of these political branches. And if you are out here trying to play judge, jury, and executioner and tell the people that are your boss what they can and can't do, you got to go. It does not work like that. The system has to work with checks and balances. But when the judicial branch starts to flex its weight, thinking that it's the branch in charge, they have to learn quick, fast, and hurry that they're not. So now the question becomes, is this accountability by just firing these people? Or is it just the executive branch showing who's in control? From my perspective, this is what it looks like when the administration decides to act from the inside and not waiting for Congress to approve anything because, hey, you have the authority to do this, right? They're not rewriting laws. They're not retooling it and reshaping it to say that only Trump can do this. This is the way the executive branch has always been ran since the Congress gave and delegated the authority to the executive branch. But changing who enforces these things, because you have to understand, when you control the position, you can control the influence and the outcome. When you change that, you have to make sure the people that are in charge are not corrupt. And for far too long, the government has been out of whack, out of balance. The Congress has been in control of the executive and in control of the judicial. The judicial is supposed to keep the legislative in check, and the legislative is supposed to keep the executive in check. And the executive is supposed to keep both judicial and legislative in check when those people step outside. But when you have inside the executive, the judicial aspect of the executive acting out on the behalf of certain congressmen or even certain Supreme Court judges, you have a problem. And that's where this story really sits on the shelf at. It's not just immigration, but who controls the process itself. And I would implore you to go out and research for yourself. Do not take my word for how the government works. Go out, pick up the Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3, and know how your government functions. Understand that. Understand that it is the same mirror for the states. They have to work in the same manner. And when these government agencies and government bodies start acting out of their lane, you start to have problems. You start to have leaks and holes. And we cannot be subservient to leaks and holes. Otherwise, our system doesn't work. And we, the people, are the ones that suffer for that, right? I don't want to suffer anymore. You don't want to suffer anymore. But the suffering is going to continue because all across the world, not just the United States, these legislative and judicial branches are making decisions that affect and impact the entirety of the world. Kind of like how the UN is technically fighting against human rights, even though they say who does and who doesn't violate human rights. They're about to violate them. In our next story right here, the UN versus human rights. The United Nations just made a huge, and I'm not talking about kind of sort of, this is not for breaking news or pomp and circumstance. They just made a monumental move, and they're raising serious questions about their credibility and their cognitive ability, really and truly, not just policy, but their credibility. The United Nations Economic and Social Council voted to place a new set of countries into positions that would influence human rights. So you know what human rights are. The right to live, the right to be and do, as long as what you do, technically it's kind of like a offshoot of our Fourth Amendment, right? And our first 10 amendments, really and truly. But just the right to live your life peacefully. As long as what you're doing doesn't infringe upon what I'm doing, we're good. That is where your human rights end, where mine begin, and mine end where yours begin, right? Well, the UN says, hey, we got you. We're going to put Iran on a council for human rights. Isn't America in a current conflict war with Iran? Wasn't Iran and their government taking the lives of their own people who spoke out against them? Yeah, this is why this is a controversial thing, right? This is not just a symbolic role. These people are going to shape human rights policies, women's rights initiatives, counterterrorism frameworks. So I just got the leftists right there with the women's rights initiatives right there. You guys hate when women's in America don't have their rights, right? And you stand up for women around the world, right? Well, one of the largest violators of human rights, let alone women's rights, just got power to shape it for the United Nations. Oh, that's not enough? I got you. At the same time, countries like China and Cuba have also been placed on that panel. Yeah, and they get to influence just as Iran gets to influence which organizations get access to the UN system. So not only do they get to shape these policies and make these policies and determine these policies, they get to say who has access to these systems. So to give you an idea of what this means is if a country is being violated, and that country, let's say, is a Muslim sympathetic country, and their people are crying out, and really that should be more than enough to give access to the systems. Well, Iran, China, and Cuba get to say, nah, you don't get access to that. Nah, you don't do that. These bodies help decide who gets a voice, who gets platformed, and which issues get attention. And you just put 3 of the world's largest human rights, women's rights, and terrorism on the board of this panel to make these decisions. They get major say in this. And that's not a problem. That's not a conflict of interest. UN, have you lost your mind? Have you? Organizations like the UN Watch have pushback. The UN Watch is an organization that is set up to make sure the UN's doing what it's supposed to, and they're pushing back. They're calling this move a serious failure in oversight. The United States was the primary. For those that don't think that the United States, there's a bunch of leftists out here that don't believe that the United States is a good country, but the United States was the primary country to oppose this. They had the largest voice instantaneously. They didn't hesitate. And while many other nations either supported it or stayed silent, because being silent is complicity, right? I saw what happened, but I'm not going to say anything, right? I just pulled my phone out and yelled "World Star," but I didn't help, right? You're just as complicit as the person committing the crime. So a lot of these countries either supported it or stayed silent. There were only a small handful of countries that actually said anything. Why? Well, it would seem like this is kind of like a shot or a middle finger to the United States for what they're doing to Iran. And China is on the inside nudging, hey, we want to be a part of it too. And they've just let these people be a part of this stuff. It makes no sense. It's almost like we're living in bizarro land, or almost as if the UN feels sorry for this, so they're going to perpetuate the problem by giving these people more power than they should have. So now the question is, what happens when the institutions that are meant to enforce standards are influenced by those accused of violating them the most? This is not just about global politics, right? And I know this story isn't directly about America, right? But this affects all the nations that are a part of the UN and even those that are not a part of it. It's about who controls the narrative. There are countries that are not a part of the UN that cry out and the UN goes in and helps. That might not get help anymore because of the people that you have running the ship now. When you influence the system, you influence what the world can see. This is the difference between truth and fact. So the fact of the matter is you saw someone do something bad. But the truth of the matter is that person did what you saw that you thought was bad because they were defending someone else. That's the truth of the matter. So when you only have facts, you can be lied to, and you can influence people to see what you want them to see. Because the fact of the matter is Iran, China, and Cuba are on this panel now, and that they get to influence things. What they get to influence is a lie. The truth of the matter is that they're going to influence something that dictates how you feel. And no country, especially ones that have a black cloud over their head, is going to make things look bad for themselves. They're going to do any and everything to make you think that we're not doing this. When credibility starts to shift, trust follows it. I, for one, like to keep the truth, not your truth, not my truth, but the truth. But when you put bad actors at the helm of the ship, you're calling for trouble, not just for some, but for all. You can take that any way you want to, man. Some people are going to believe it. Some people are just going to shrug it off because it's not affecting them. But once it finally affects you, don't start crying out then, because you heard it first here. And you should be crying out now. Hey, America, do something. America already pays most of the bills when it comes to the UN anyway. So they should flex some of that money around to make the changes that are necessary to remove these people from the positions that they were placed in by clearly demented individuals. Our next story here is Pimp Daddy Swalwell. Pimp Daddy Swalwell. Now, I might take a little bit of extra time on this one. I wasn't going to talk about this at all, but it stepped into my arena when the Congress started to investigate, right? A sitting current member of Congress is now under investigation. And that investigation is about Representative Eric Swalwell. I also talked about a couple of weeks ago about another representative in Texas, which his name escapes me right now, and I didn't put it down on my notes. But he was sleeping with one of his staffers, and no real information has come out. And we can speculate all day, every day, which I won't do. But the girl set herself on fire. That is not speculation. That is fact. Now, why would she do that? Maybe her husband found out. I don't know. But that's what the people in the area that were dealing with this situation was saying. That was one of the reasonings. I don't know. Again, not going to speculate. I'm only going to tell you what others are saying about the matter. But Representative Eric Swalwell is also facing some axing type motions here. He has multiple, not one, not two, not three, not four, but multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. And honestly, I hate the fact that we call these things sexual misconduct. It kind of makes it sound, nicer than what it really is. Is it really sexual misconduct, or did this guy do something that he shouldn't be doing? Because if one of us normal people down here that are not in Congress did something like this, they would call it rape. Not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to call it what it is, because it is what it is. Yet, some reason, some way, let me pull this one off the screen here. For some reason, you're killing me. If you don't get off the screen, I don't know what's going on. Where are you at? That's Pimp Daddy Swalwell. Of course, it wants to be weird here. Give me 1 second. Let me fix that. All right. There we go. And I think, there we go. Fantastic. Because off the screen, I apologize. But if you or I were to do something like this, we would be called what it's called. But when a congressman or someone in a high political affiliation does something, it gets a nice name to it. It gets a really nice name to it. And I for one don't like that. I don't like the fact that it gets a nice name. But I have some tweets here from Mr. Swalwell, where he made some statements like to the effect of believe all women, because you got to believe all women, right? So our first tweet here, he says 100% believe survivors. The problem is this didn't age well for Eric at all. It didn't age well. Our next tweet here, he says support survivors, believe survivors. We are here with you. Hands off. Well, Mr. Swalwell, it seems like you were quite hands-on, sir. We'll get to the video in a second. Our next tweet here, Mr. Eric has a compilation which CNN says, hey, we're going to release this. He says sexual assault victims deserve respect. No one is above the law. These are all, if you don't know, in reference to Donald Trump, right? Because Eric Swalwell was one of the big voices speaking against Donald Trump when someone said that Trump assaulted a woman, right? Funny enough, when Trump did it, they didn't say it was sexual misconduct. They called it rape. Crazy to me. But he says, no one is above the law. Are you ready to stand up for women? Well, 4 women described sexual misconduct by Representative Eric Swalwell. Our fourth tweet here says, sorry. Very sorry to hear this. She deserves the same respect that every sexual assault victim should receive. Believe survivors. Then Eric Swalwell comes out and says that he didn't do anything. So should we believe all women, Eric, according to your tweets? Or should we believe you? Because it was all rainbows and butterflies when the camera was pointed at Trump. But now that it's pointed at you, my boy, you're backpedaling faster than the Roadrunner. So here's the video. And I'm pretty sure you've all seen this. Here's the video. Check him out. Look at what he's doing. Just grabbing and rolling all over. And it seems like they got like some type of little menage a trois or romper room fest. You know, this is got to speak lightly on some things because kids might be watching, God forbid. But this is an adult show because I'm giving you adult news. But the House Committee or the House Ethics Committee has stepped up and said, we're going to officially open investigations into you and into the gentleman from Texas. And it's best that you guys go ahead and just step down before we have to do it. But you're still going to get investigated. And this comes, again, after several women have come forth saying that he's done things to them. You saw the video. And now, this is where I kind of separate a little bit from these allegations. But in that video, that woman said she was too intoxicated to consent. But, ma'am, you did it twice. You did it twice. That was not just one-time event. That was twice. And if you were too intoxicated to consent 2 times in a row, but you did it a second time, either you have a drinking problem or you had something going on with him. But I'm not victim shaming. I do believe that the man was a little bit forceful. The way he grabbed her face, you know, was kind of odd, you know, and plus you're being recorded. So who knows what else is going to come out or what was going on. But the House Ethics Committee is saying, hey, yeah, one accusation comes from a hard place, but you can shrug that off. But when you get 3 extra following that, you got a problem. And the main accusation is coming from a staffer. And she's claiming that, again, I was too intoxicated to give consent. And the others allege improper behavior or inappropriate behavior and explicit messages. You know, he's sending pictures of that wing dang doodle. Yeah. And then the other one says that he's abusing his position of power, which we know to be a huge thing in America, where people that are high up in the pecking order say, because I'm a boss or this, that, or third, I should be able to have my way with whomever I want to have my way with. And I'll make you sign an NDA or pay you to be quiet. We know this happens all the time. They don't just make movies about it. There's plenty of court cases to follow it. But the response here is, following all of these allegations, Swalwell has stepped down willfully, not really. And he stepped down from his role on the very committee that is investigating him. Isn't that something? You got an assaulter on a committee that's supposed to check for sexual misconduct, and now he's got to step down from that position. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? But let's step back a little bit. This is not just about one individual. It raises a broader issue that's going on in our government, especially accountability. Accountability inside of the government. When power and position are involved, standards matter. You're supposed to be above reproach, right? You're supposed to be, at least, because the same system that investigates others must be willing to be investigated itself. And it seems that once it gets investigated and some skirts are knocked up, things don't look like they're supposed to. And when the allegations reach this type of level, transparency is not optional. You got to do what needs to be done. And in this man's case, it ain't looking so hot. So it would seem that a Republican congressman played in the dark holes, and the Democratic congressman's playing in the dark holes, and now some sort of accountability is coming out of this. Personally, I would love to see both of these men thoroughly investigated, and if extenuating wrongdoings are found, that they're imprisoned. Why do we keep playing these games with these men who do these evil things and they get away with it? It makes no sense to me, because if you or I were to do any of these things that these men and women do in Congress, we would be put under the prison. Yet they get to get a slap on the wrist and told to corporately, go ahead and resign. Go ahead and, we don't want to make your image look bad. Go ahead and step down willfully, and we'll make it easy on you. No, you wouldn't make it easy on us. Why are you making it easy on these people? That's not very intelligent. Not very intelligent in the slightest. Which brings me to the next story. Intelligence is not so intelligent. Most of you have probably already heard. Again, this is a bigger story, but it's something that does need to be spoken about. New statements on the intelligence committees have been brought forth, and it seems to be opening up some old wounds, and some old things are resurfacing here. And this one is, again, cutting deep into those old wounds. Under the office of the Director of National Intelligence, which you know Tulsi Gabbard is ahead of that, Tulsi Gabbard is releasing new statements, pointing out to what she's saying and describing as a coordinated effort within the intelligence agencies, plural, not singular, intelligence agencies, as a concerted effort to shape a narrative against, Donald Jaquavius Trump, right? They have a narrative that was being spun up against him in multiple intelligence agencies. And according to those statements, this was not just a faulty analysis. Kind of seems like they were maybe put up to it. And I know most would say that this is misinformation or fake news. This is not me saying this. This is what, the Director of National Intelligence is telling everybody. Not me, not Lumberjack. I'm only regurgitating the information that she gave. From my perspective, of course, right? It may have also involved selective use of intelligence, framing of information, and a narrative building to influence outcomes. Kind of sounds like manipulation to me. Anybody else? Kind of sounds like it, manipulation. So this includes events that contributed to his impeachment proceedings. Yeah. Gabbard has suggested that some officials could face, now, I hate the way this is worded, that some of these officials could face criminal referral. What in the blue hell is a criminal referral? Let one of you or myself falsify documentation, or maybe even just make a mistake on our documentation. Again, they're going to throw you under the prison. They're not going to play around with you or play games with you. They're going to eat you alive. But some of these officials might face criminal referral. Ultimately, for what she describes as manipulation and abuse of intelligence authorities, that's the going rate of what's going to happen to these people. Referral to crimes. How can you refer someone to crime? What kind of weirdness is that? I don't understand. I really don't understand. I really, really don't understand how you can refer someone to criminal proceedings. It's not like they're trying to get a job, right? But let's step back. For years, some have argued that intelligence agencies were not neutral. I'm one of them. And I know a couple others who have always believed that these intelligence agencies weren't actually on the up and up like they're supposed to. But that narrative is being shaped. We believe that the narratives were being shaped, not just reported. This goes beyond one administration, so don't think it's just about Trump. Because if intelligence can be influenced, then trust becomes unstable. And we like trust, right? We like truth, right? Or do we only like truth when it suits us? Not just in the government, but in the elections. So we're talking about the states, institutions, and outcomes. If the outcomes are not true, who's really running the show? Because intelligence, it supports information. And if the intelligence is supporting the information and the information is being tailored to suit a certain narrative, you're being driven like Miss Daisy. They're steering you all around. Left, right, middle, back, any way they please. And when that that line gets blurred or stepped on or moved around on, you no longer can say you're just dealing with information. You're dealing with influence and manipulation. And I, for one, am very tired of being manipulated. How about you? Are you tired of being manipulated by the federal government? By people who are supposed to be for the people? For we the people? It seems to me that these people are only for themselves. Really does. Now, for the past couple of weeks, I have been heavily smacking the actions of Trump, but there seems to be some type of light at the end of the tunnel with his actions as the commander-in-chief and putting us in this conflict, which is really a war. But ultimately, Trump is the captain now. He is the captain now. After failed ceasefire talks, which they didn't really fail per se, because the ceasefire, which a lot of people don't seem to know, that the ceasefire was only between America and Iran, not America, Iran, and Israel, or any other countries, really. I think maybe Lebanon was a part of that, but it was mainly between the United States and Iran. The United States has now shifted from warning actions to full-blown actions. Actions. Kind of like action. Roll the clip, you know? And they move with a big stick in this situation. It's a big stick. Under the United States Central Command, the U.S. military's naval forces have now started enacting blockades targeting specifically and only, I need you to know that it's specifically and only Iran. Because there's a bunch of leftists out there, oh, these blockades are blocking countries that need help. Oh. No, it's only targeting anything coming out or in to Iran. Again, the ships that are leaving and entering Iranian ports are the ones being stopped, redirected, or boarded if necessary. Kind of seems pirate-ish. That's why the title is I'm the Captain, right? The objective of this is pretty clear. Apply pressure to Tehran, specifically to disrupt oil exports, trade movement, and economic flow. Essentially, the United States is trying to choke out what makes Iran, Iran. Not for the sake to hurt Iran, but to put an end to this war with less bloodshed, right? And basically, because he's done what he's doing, it is given the United States almost complete control over how oil flows in the world now. Because everybody was saying, oh, because you're doing this, you're going to stop everything that flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, that's what the left sounds like, right? Well, apparently, because this ties directly to the Strait of Hormuz, roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through there. Because he's able to do the blockade, he can now redirect the oil through the Gulf. And this is making it one of the most critical economic moves the United States has ever made, practically in the history of the country. You have one of the largest world economic arteries, being the Strait of Hormuz, shut down by Iran. And now the United States comes in like a can opener and makes moves. CENTCOM has made it pretty clear that this is not just a full shutdown. Again, I have to reiterate, this is not a full shutdown of that area. It's only to affect Iran. Ships bound for other countries get to flow right on through. Ships bound for Iran get stopped. It is what it is. And the United States is not even stopping like a critical entry of things coming into it. So like food, water, stuff like that still gets to flow in and out of Iran. But if it's something that they need for war, it's going to get shut off. Plain and simple. CENTCOM has made that very clear. And a lot of people are still out here running off and piping off at the mouth like this is, oh, America's trying to use warfare to starve people out and hurt people, and they're hurting all the other nations. No, they're not. The markets are actually reacting to this. Oil prices have hit a sharp surge, but maybe, because it did cross the $100 per barrel to about $115 per barrel, but maybe with this new route that's being shaped out by America blocking these areas, the prices might come down. My fingers are crossed on this because even though it's still not as high as under Biden, we are still feeling it. Reality sets in. We're still feeling this, right? So now the question is this pressure that the United States is applying to this area and to Iran enough to enforce the change that they're hoping to get? Or does it risk escalating it further? Because we can't just say it's going to do this. We have been told week in and week out that we've done something and it did this, only to find out later on that it didn't do what they said it was going to do. Trump said June 22nd, 2025, that we shut down their nuclear program. Then shortly after that, he says that we didn't totally shut it down, but we put a big damper on it. Well, you can't say that you shut something down and then come back a couple of days later saying that it wasn't totally shut down, but we're going to have to do some more. We have been told by Trump that we stopped all of their military prowess and power, only to find out that they're still bombing people. So if you're stopping something, it means you stopped it. If you put an end to something, it means you put an end to it, not that you kind of sort of hindered it or slowed it down. This is what it looks like when economic pressure becomes a weapon. And Trump, from my perspective, has gotten back to old Trump, where instead of using a hammer to fix things, he uses the flow of money to fix things. That was his most effective tool at the beginning of 2025 and all through his first presidency, using the almighty dollar, be it a euro, a peso, or a yen, to affect change in the world. And he has been very effective at this. He's not been very effective at war, because he tells us one thing, but then in the next breath says another. Economic pressure works. It works. Economic pressure stops nukes. Economic pressure stops fighting, unless it's the Middle East, because those people, yeah, you get it. But it stops a lot. No bombs needed. No invasions needed. Just controlling of movement. Something simple as controlling movement, economically, of course, puts a whole end to things. Now, I hear you now. Well, they're using the military to do it. But if the military never has to fire a shot, it's not war. Because when you could control the flow, you could control the outcome. And this is the Trump that we in America are actually used to. At least I'm used to it. And I think that the moves he's making are beautiful, man. They're absolutely gorgeous in this aspect. Now, if he can keep this pressure right here on the neck of the enemy, he might be able to choke it out without losing any more American lives. He might be able to choke it out before we ever get into the summer. I would love this. I know a lot of people would love this. Then these men and women who were sent over there can come home and be with their families. No more life loss, no more problems. And all it took was a little bit of economic pressure, not war pressure. Some people might not like that. You know what I'm talking about. But I like that. America likes that. Because America should be protecting and defending America, not the rest of the world. That's what our military is for, right? Oh, well, I'm a little lumberjack. The Constitution says foreign and domestic. Foreign adversaries of us. Domestic adversaries of us. Not foreign adversaries of an ally. Doesn't work like that. Never has worked like that. Never was meant to work like that. But another really cool thing has taken place abroad from America. There has been an Indo alliance with America. Nope, that's the wrong one. I was supposed to show that. By the way, let me back up. One time for the one time. This right here is the placement, so you guys can see the placement of every single red dot is the U.S. Navy. So we got that whole bad boy clogged up. Ain't no Pepto-Bismol going to clear that out. We got it locked up. And I do apologize for skipping that, but I'm on a roll here. But our next story is indeed the Indo Alliance. We're right there with it. The United States is making more huge moves. And this is probably as big as the U.S. blocking the Strait of Hormuz to apply pressure to Iran. Because if you know or have been around before in the show, we talked about the South China Sea. And this new alliance is going to make major waves. Major waves. This is pre-conflict Trump. Right here is what we're seeing. Pre-conflict Trump. So the United States has made an important move in a region that we really didn't have any control in before. It was all ran by China in the Indo-Pacific. The United States is strengthening their ties with Indonesia specifically, and the talks are underway to secure military oversight and overflight access through Indonesia airspace, right? Which is huge. We never had this before. And along with this broader defense partnership, it will include things like, which was announced by Pete Hegseth, by the way, just so you know who said this. I'm not saying this. Pete Hegseth said this, and the Indonesian leadership said this, that the agreement is targeting and expanding upon joint training, military coordination, and long-term operational presence, which means it gives us, really and truly, call it what it is, a base in the Indonesian area, which we never had before, which gives us a stronger presence and the ability to mobilize faster in the South China Sea. So if China wants to get stupid, which we know they like to do every now and then, they like to toe the line, but the toenail is the only thing crossing the line, and the toe's not, by dropping bombs or shooting missiles over islands that are not harmful or doing anything to China, just so China can, use that muscle that they like to flex every now and then to let people know that they're in control, when really all you're doing is wasting munitions, right? But this matters. This matters. Indonesia sits in a critical location near a major global choke point, kind of like the Strait of Hormuz. Iran sits at a strategic global choke point, which America came in and UNO reversed it and took control of it. But the South China Sea, which I got another strait for you, the Strait of, I'm going to butcher this, Malacca, I think is how you say it, Malacca. Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is now going to be under control by the United States. And this is absolutely gorgeous. Here's the agreement. You can pause to read it. If you're going to watch this later, you can pause to read it. This is one of the most strategic shipping lanes on planet Earth. It is one of, again, hear me out. Everybody's been talking about the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Malacca is one of the most strategic shipping lanes on the Earth, because China gets to dictate prior to this agreement that it might go through. Hopefully it goes through. They already got stuff written up, so it's a good sign. They controlled it to front to back. And now we finally moved to a position where we might have control over it. We might have control over it. And that's a strategic impact against China. Because I do have another story coming up here letting you know that China's not sitting idly by while America makes moves against Iran. They're not sitting idly by. And I want to let you guys know something about China, but we'll get there when we get there. This move does several things. One, it improves the U.S. response time, which I said earlier. It strengthens regional positioning, and it supports trade flow. Where we had no real control over trade flow before in these areas, now we got it. We there, baby. And this directly counters growing influence from China. So now the question is, hey, is this partnership about stability, or is it about positioning for future conflict? Because we know that because America does something big like this, China is going to flex a little bit. And maybe one day, God forbid, one of those rockets they like to flex with might hit somebody of importance. And now we're in another conflict. And I think, honestly, China is hoping for that. Maybe they're not. I don't know. I'm not China. But it would seem so because they keep doing it, right? This is not just about an alliance. It's about access. Access that we didn't previously have. Because the regions like this, control is not just land. It's airspace, sea lanes, and movement. Where we didn't have it before, and China was freely able to do what they wanted in these lanes, baby. They could rock the boat, change positions. They could do it. Now we get to do it. And on the side that moves faster determines what happens. Whereas China had that fast movement before, now we have a leg up in this, right? Usually this controls what happens next. And hopefully this control puts us in a good position, because what China is about to do and is doing and has been pushing to do does not benefit us in the slightest. It actually hurts us quite a bit. China is playing chess. They are playing chess. Whatever type of chess you want, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, whatever chess you believe that they're playing the top level of this chess. And they're making moves just as the United States is making moves. And it's not military moves. China, so what I wanted to explain to you guys before, China doesn't make military moves. They flex their military power to show you how big their rocket is. They flex their big rockets, but they don't make military moves. China makes political and economic moves. I'm going to state that again because I don't think some of you heard me. China makes political and economic moves. If you don't believe that, you think I'm wrong, I'm going to tell you to your face, you're stupid. Why are you stupid? Well, China has reopened limited ties with Taiwan. We know that Taiwan has been a place of contention with China for as long as Britain liberated Taiwan, right? If you know your history, you know. But Taiwan has always been a place of contention for China. Well, they're reopening limited ties with them. And it includes things like direct flights, which were completely cut off before, eased trade restrictions, which they were very staunch on those trade restrictions before, especially because Taiwan's been doing heavy business with the United States. Matter of fact, when the United States gave Taiwan weapons, China started flying those big rockets over top of Taiwan, right? And now they've renewed some communication channels where there weren't any before. So while America is distracted over in the Middle East, China's making allies with an enemy, so to speak. But there is a catch to this. I don't want you to think that Taiwan has broken ties with the United States, because there is a huge catch. This is not happening through Taiwan's current leadership. It's currently happening through China talking to Taiwan's opposing political party. The political figures more open to talking to China, more China sympathetic, are working with Beijing directly. So, in the event that the current regime in Taiwan loses and this new one steps in, you're going to have a Chinese sympathetic Taiwan, which is not good in the slightest, because they could be so sympathetic that they ease right back into assimilation with China, which would directly hurt anyone dealing with Taiwan's, their chips, the big talk all throughout the early 2020s and the late 2010s. The chips. We got to have the chips. The chips are integral to our infrastructure. Yeah, China is positioning its influence for the future in Taiwan's elections. Looking for the leadership that aligns with them more closely and their interests more closely is a big move. We have seen this happen in multiple countries. One of the most notable ones is when Russia went in and greased the palms of previous Ukrainian leadership that were Russia sympathetic and not Western world sympathetic, right? There's a contradiction here. At the same time, China continues to pressure them militarily by showing their big rockets, flying them over their country. They're also hitting them politically. China has not stopped flying the warplanes near Taiwan. They've not stopped shooting the rockets near Taiwan. But they're refusing to have formal engagement with the current government. And why this matters is that there's no diplomacy currently happening. It's almost like a form of espionage, right? Kind of like what, what America does. America sets up future governments, overthrowing leadership. Seems like China's learning how to play how America plays. The United States is Taiwan's primary arms provider. And if China can become Taiwan's primary arms provider with a new government in place, we are in trouble. You hear me? We're in trouble. The strong ties between the two have been critical for regional stability. If we lose Taiwan to China, we lose all stability in that region. All of it goes right out the window. If the influence shifts, we are in trouble. And right now, America has its pants down dealing with Iran because of Israel. We're going to call a spade. And China is not taking it lying down. You say, oh, well, we stopped oil to China and Russia. It's a win for America. I guarantee you, if we lose Taiwan to China, that oil China lost will be to none effect. Because then they get to beat the hell out of us economically over the chips. How else or where else are we going to get them? Oh, well, we made these facilities. Biden put some facilities. Trump put some facilities. Where are we going to get the material? Where are we going to get the material? The rare earth minerals. You know, I've talked about it a lot on this show. Trump has made major strides in getting rare earth minerals. But if China gets Taiwan, the number one facilitator of these chips in the world, the ones that are actually teaching us how to make them in our facilities here, and China continues to control they control, if you guys don't remember, 90% of the world's rare earth minerals. They control it. So they will control the largest manufacturer of chips in the world and 90% of the world's rare earth minerals. We're at their beck and call. Our boom booms and weapons don't work without those chips. And they'll be in complete control of that. So I need you to understand the seriousness of this. China can lose the oil. They could take that hit. They could pay the extra for that. But we can't not have our weapons, which gives us the military advantage. And if we lose these chips, we lose the military advantage. China wins without ever firing a single freaking shot. But we stopped the oil, right? I would love to have a debate with someone on this and tell me how we come out on top if we lose Taiwan here. Oh, we won against Iran. The greater Israel can start their march. But we lost. America lost to China. Where do you think all that development of weaponry comes from? Israel, right? How are we going to develop the weapons if we don't have the chips? We don't have the rare earth minerals. So that renders our relationship really with Israel null and void. Oh, they still give us intel. What is the intel going to do if we don't have the weapons to put the intel to use? I'm just asking common sense questions. No feelings here, just common sense questions. And I need you to understand that this is huge. So you better pray and ask the good Lord above that China fails at this push, that Taiwan's elections don't go the way that China wants it. Otherwise, we are in trouble. Huge trouble. Absolutely huge trouble. But we're going to move on to our last segment here, our very last segment. And I appreciate you guys for sitting with me this long. It's a little bit longer, but this last segment is very important to me. And I've had a lot of people tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I was wrong. So I went and got a little bit more research done and strengthened my resolve. And you know what? It proved what I initially said to be even further correct. Our next story is Israeli war on belief. Jerusalem is becoming a flashpoint once again. But this time, it's not about land. It's not about land. It's about who controls belief. So, for those that don't know, because a lot of you don't know, and there's no fault of your own here that you don't know this, you just don't take the time to learn or read until something happens, which is fine. Ignorance is bliss, right? I hate that saying, but it's bliss, right? At the center of all of this, at the heart of this tension, is the Temple of the Mount, which is known as the Al-Aqsa compound. I'm not Muslim, so I don't speak the language that they speak, but I butchered the crap out of that, but whatever. It's one of the most sensitive religious sites in the world, Actually, it's not one of, it is the most sensitive. The most sensitive. Wars have been started solely off of a piece of area where this sits, right? So we have to understand why this area is so important. We also have to understand the legalities of this particular area, right? So there was a status quo agreement. And for decades, access has been governed by what is known, again, as the status quo agreement to balance this particular region. And it was built over time. It didn't just start out the gate. So to give you an understanding, here's a map of this particular area. It's not even all over Jerusalem. It's just a small little area inside of Jerusalem, right? So the Muslims, if you look up at the top right, control and have their worship site. So Jews can come visit their worship site, but they cannot worship and pray in this worship site, right? It's considered as haram, right? Christians maintain access to their own holy sites in the location top left, and technically the bottom left as well, because Armenians were truly the first Christians. You should do your history on that as well. We've been told a lot of things that aren't necessarily true, but Christians control their own holy sites. And why this matters is there is created a balance. And if you look in the bottom right hand of this is where the Western Wall is and where the Jews control their religious site. And this balance has prevented full-scale religious conflict for years. It has worked out beautifully for years. But now it seems to be in turmoil. Because once access shifts to these locations, tensions are going to rise. So I'm going to go off script a little bit because, like I said, I've had people tell me I didn't know what I was talking about. When I told them that on Resurrection Weekend, not Easter, you can call it Easter if you want, whatever, but on Resurrection Weekend, April 5th, more specifically, that Christians, not Muslims, not Jews, but Christians were kicked out of this area. And I was told that I didn't give the whole picture, that this whole area was evacuated. They had everybody leave, the Muslims, the Jews, the Armenians, the Christians, everybody was pushed out. And I should have put the video up because you could see how violently these people were dealt with. They were being thrown down, handcuffed, pushed up against walls, forced out with batons and riot shields by the Israeli law enforcement. You're not telling the whole picture, Lumberjack. You're not telling the whole picture. I thought you were a man of integrity who told all sides. Well, I do. Because I said in response to that it was just the Christians kicked out. And the reasons they said that this was done was because of the war and the conflict. They didn't want the area to get bombed. So they made everybody evacuate from this area. And that was the reason that Israel did what they did. But the problem here lies with the video I'm about to show you. Notice the date. I didn't put this here, but notice the date here. Priestly blessings held at the Western Wall, April 5th, 2026, the very same day that Christians were kicked out. Why are these ghosts here with striped ghost hats able to worship as they see fit at their Western Wall, but Christians were kicked out? I'm not telling the whole picture. You don't see the whole picture because you're Islamophobic, Christian phobic, but pro-Judaism, pro-Israel. You see it for yourself here. These people are worshiping at the very same time outside of these little Western walls. Americans, I had a friend there at this time, were escorted out, corralled out like animals, some thrown down, some beaten with batons. I should have brought the other video up. I really should have. But I tell all sides of the truth that are presented to me. I'm not going to sit around and give you or spoon feed you some BS to make myself feel good or look good. I was told that everybody was evacuated because of the threat of bombing. Yet, you saw for yourself. I didn't make that video. You can go look it up for yourself. Israel posted that video. I didn't. But Americans that are Christian, Palestinians that are Christians, Egyptians that are Christians, Eastern Orthodox Christians were all kicked out of their respective places of worship on Resurrection Weekend. While the Jews got to celebrate and worship freely. Ramadan, Resurrection Sunday. But the problem is, the only ones that were getting to celebrate or worship on that day were the Jews. Some of the groups were completely barred altogether, not able to come back, while others have been allowed in a security protection, which solely were the Jews. Israel's position on this is security. Again, security. But critics argue, why didn't the Jews get kicked out as well if it's about security? This war is between Iran and Israel, not any other Muslim nations, because there's a Muslim quarter here. The problem lies when we start to emotionally connect to something because our belief system tells us to. But the problem is most people don't read properly, because if you're a Christian, your belief system doesn't tell you to, but others it does. And in this case, you can't be so Israel connected that you're disconnected from reality, that you can't see the truth right before you. As always, I appreciate you guys for joining me. I hope you get to join me next time, where I'm going to bring you some more heat. This has been Timber Talk. I'm your host, American Lumberjack. I will see you next time.